Hi guys, today we are going to discuss the accounting treatment of overheads. First of all, let me tell you how we can calculate the cost of a product. When you want to calculate the cost of a product, we need to identify the direct cost and the indirect production cost. That indirect production cost is called the overheads. And this overhead comprises of indirect material, indirect labor, and indirect expense. Indirect cost, by definition, is the cost that cannot be easily identified with specific cost unit. So it's difficult to incorporate the or identify the overhead cost into a cost unit. So we need to know the process through which we can incorporate overhead cost into the product cost. So first of all, let me inform you that the overhead cost or the production cost incurred in the factory uh, deals with the overall production cost centers cost and the service cost centers cost. Means total overheads are incurred either in the production cost center or the service cost center. Production cost center is directly involved in making the product, and the service cost center is providing some sort of facility to the production cost centers to produce the product. So, in order to calculate the overhead cost per unit, first of all, we have to understand how we will do this. So, this can be done in stages. Like, first of all, the first stage is the allocation of overheads. The next step is the apportionment of overheads. And then the reapportionment process, and in last the process of absorption. Through all these steps we can be able to charge overhead cost into a specific cost unit. So let's discuss what is the meaning of allocation of overheads and what type of indirect cost can be transferred through this process. Allocation means charging indirect material and indirect labor to specific cost centers. We can easily find out that what cost center is incurring these indirect material and indirect labor cost. And this can be charged to both production cost center and service cost centers. In the next step, after allocating the indirect material and indirect labor, the last part of overhead is indirect expense. And it comprises of the rent of the building, the supervisor's salary, etc., etc. And these are the common costs, so cannot be directly charged to a specific cost center. Instead, these common costs can be shared among the different cost center, that is the production cost centers and service cost centers, on the basis of who is getting more benefits out of it. For example, take an example of rent of factory. Assuming the rent of factory is 200,000. So we have to identify the on what basis we can share the cost of the rent among different cost centers. So one of the bases of apportionment that we usually use in order to charge these overhead is the floor area occupied by different cost centers. Assuming floor area acquired by the cost centers are 10,000 square meter, 5,000 square meter, and 3,000 square meter. So we will be apportioning these 200,000 of overheads on the basis of these floor area occupied. So how it is to be charged to A, the total amount is to be charged like 200,000 overheads multiplied by the area occupied divided by the total area of the factory. In this way, we can identify that total overhead cost is to be charged to the cost center. Specifically, what amount of cost is to be accepted by the production cost center A. And similarly to the other cost centers, we can share this out. So in order to apportion the overhead cost, we have to identify a suitable basis of apportionment. Let's discuss few bases of apportionment. When we have to share the rent cost, usual basis is floor area. When we have to share the light and heat, most of the time is also the floor area. We have to discuss the machine depreciation, then it is based on the book value of machine, and if the overhead cost that is to be apportioned is insurance of factory, then again it is to be based on floor area, and if it's insurance of machine, then the value of machine, and so on. After apportioning the overheads to the specific cost centers, then now let's see, there are two production cost centers and there is only one service cost center, and the total overheads allocated and apportioned between them is, assuming it's 500,000, 400,000, and 100,000, and this is a service cost center. Now that service cost center is not directly involved in the production process. So we have to transfer this service cost centers overheads to the production cost centers. Now in order to reapportion this service cost center overheads, we have to identify how A and B is getting services from C. For example, let's assume that the service cost center is store, and the production cost centers are getting the benefits in terms of number of requisitions raised. And A has raised 10,000 requisitions and B has raised 8,000 requisitions. So how will we transfer the service cost center cost? Let me identify. Total overhead cost is 100,000 multiplied by the service used by A out of the total services. And similarly, we will charge or reapportion on the basis of services used by both production cost centers. In this way, we will be able to identify the overall cost related to production cost centers. And these are the reapportioned amounts. So after reapportionment, now we have the figures of two production cost center overheads. But still we have no idea about how we can transfer these overheads to a specific cost unit. So for that purpose, we will start another process that is called the absorption. What it means to charge overheads to specific cost unit. This absorption process comprises of step number one, in that we will find an overhead absorption rate by using the formula that is budgeted overheads divided by the budgeted level of activity. In the next step, on the basis of the rate, we will charge the overhead to the product cost by using this formula OAR multiplied by the actual level of activity. But once we have charged overheads into the production cost, it might be possible that either we have charged over or under over we have charged overheads either as under absorbed overheads or over absorbed overheads. So in order to find out whether we have charged it over or under, we'll compare the actual overheads with the absorbed overheads. And this results in under or over absorption. For example, if the actual overheads are 1,50,000 and we have only absorbed 1,20,000, then this positive 30,000 is under absorption. So this positive value is under absorption. Similarly, if the value of actual overhead is 150, but we have absorbed 1,60,000, this negative value is over absorption. Under absorption means cost is understated. That means we have to increase our cost. Similarly, over absorption means the cost is overstated. That means we have to decrease our cost. Now, let's discuss its first part, that is how we can calculate overhead absorption rate. For this, we need to identify the budgeted overheads of each cost centers, the production cost center, and a suitable budgeted level of activity. The common level of activities that we uses are the labor hours, the machine hours, number of units, it might be the labor cost, prime cost, and so on and so on. So in order to find out the rate, we have to identify what are the overheads, assuming we have 500,000 overheads and we have 100,000 labor hours. So the rate is $5 per labor hour. This is the rate through which we will absorb the overhead cost into product cost. Now after that, in order to apply how much overhead is to be absorbed into the product cost, we need to identify the how many hours that per unit product is using, 1 unit of product is using, assuming 2 hours. So the cost to be charged is 10 per unit, or it might be we can charge in total, that is 5 per hour multiplied by the actual hours, assuming actual hours like I will assume the actual hours is 1,50,000. So that means total absorbed overheads are 7,50,000. After that, we have to compare the actual overheads with the absorbed ones. In our example, the absorbed one was 750, assuming the actual was 800,000. So the difference is positive 50,000, and that means the under absorption of overheads. So this is the basics of overhead costing. Hopefully you would enjoy learning this opportunity from my side. Wait till my next video for another topic.